Hey, so I made a video about this back in probably February, about how I really hate the phrase love yourself or self-love or any of that stuff. And I can tell that a lot of other people similarly hate that phrase because of how much people go off on how you don't need self-love in order to materialize. I think I'm going to start using the word materialize instead of manifest because I just don't like that word. But I keep seeing there's always this big debate or people get upset about it. And I understand why. There's this, I don't know, for me, this feeling about the phrase I love myself or self-love that I'm just it's not what works for me. I don't know. There's just something weird attached to it that I don't like. But it's just a language thing. Once again, everybody is talking about the same thing and just using different language. So, I think there's something kind of hippy-dippy about the term to me. And although I have not had a haircut in 20 years or dyed my hair since 1999, and for all intents and purposes could probably be considered pretty much of a hippie, there's just something about all the phrases that go along with flower power. And I don't know. There's just something I don't like about it. And so, what I think a better way to think of it as, is an absence of negative thoughts about yourself, an absence of disempowering thoughts, an absence of, or a presence of empowering thoughts, a presence of positive thoughts. I think there are kind of two sides to the coin with this whole manifestation, materialization thing. And part of it is intentionally creating a specific thing, which, I think is how most people get here. But at some point after you have done some stuff, you're going to realize that you're creating all the time, and that the really important thing to focus on is the autopilot creation, because it's what's happening the other 23 hours and 55 minutes a day. What your thoughts are, what your beliefs are, will create through you without you even being aware of it most of the time. It's how you've done your whole life. It's what's created everything you see around you. When you look around you and you take inventory, you take stock of what's going on in your life, you will have a very good idea of how clean your mind is of bad things or things that will create things that you don't want. So as far as the self-love thing goes, self-love is the autopilot part. And the autopilot part for me, I never use that phrase. I've made a bunch of videos on this channel about changing your beliefs, because this is what self-love is. And the experience, in other words, the experience that you have of loving yourself, for people who hate that language, it's just a feeling of peace and bliss and happiness in the present moment, because your mind is devoid of thoughts that are berating you or thoughts that are embarrassing you, making you feel lesser than, thoughts about the future that things are going to be bad, or perhaps you will have bad luck and end up somewhere you don't want to be. Those are the things that, when you take the time to change all of your beliefs and to really examine everything, those are the things that are gone. Those are the things that change. And then in your present moment, you experience happiness. Happiness, loving yourself, bliss, it's all just different words for the same state, essentially. And so if you hate the phrase self-love, like I do, then, you just see it for what it is, which is essentially being kind to yourself. And maybe you don't even do that intentionally. Maybe you just do that by removing all of the unkind things. That was pretty much the route that I took. And I think to get to that point, for me, it really started before all of the Neville stuff. It really started with beginning to do things to care for myself physically, because that was one area where I always felt, as I've talked about on this channel a million times, I've had big issues in the physical realm. For me, I always felt like I wasn't good enough physically, like to the point where I almost didn't feel I deserved like medical care. I didn't feel like I deserved like dental care, it just like I had such a negative opinion of the state of myself physically that like I didn't even want to have the experience of somebody else having to do anything to me physically. Like I was, it's a big part of the reason why I didn't go to the dentist for a long time. I still haven't been to the doctor since I was 19, other than like, when I got bitten by a dog last year. Getting a dog out of the road. No good deed goes unpunished, as they say. But, that was one of the things that I started doing. I've talked about my crazy 6-month dental extravaganza that kicked off, my ability to start to shift my identity and be able to actually get my body where I wanted it. And other things went into that as well. Like one of the things I've hated the most about the coronavirus thing is that I haven't been able to force myself to do things. Like I started taking really good care of myself. I started getting my teeth cleaned every 3 months. I started going and like, even though it's embarrassing, I felt really good when I would go like get waxed, like I would get like my entire lower body waxed. And even though that's like embarrassing because you have to get half naked in front of a stranger for that. And I just forced myself to do it. I was just like, you know what? I don't care how this looks. I don't care what my flaws are. I'm good enough and I deserve to go get a service done to me. And then that really helped too. It was like caring for myself made me feel better about myself. Needless to say, there's been no waxing going on since January. And it is beginning to lower my self-esteem a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. I might have to wax myself soon. But I started doing that. I started doing physical stuff for myself because it had always been such a feeling of like not deserving it or not being good enough. And when I started just doing it, it automatically changed, how I felt. That to me was an act of self-love. And, that's one way that you can love yourself. That's one way that you can, it makes me feel gross to even say it. It's one way that you can, confirm to your subconscious mind that you are valuable. And I think that's really at the heart of all the self-love stuff is, becoming aware of your own value and treating yourself accordingly. And, you can start with actions like I did, but you can also start, running down all the reasons that you have for not experiencing a state of self-love. You might, whatever your reasons are, there are a million. Your job's not good enough, your achievements aren't good enough, your whatever your stuff is. You can go through and start looking at the beliefs that go into that, and recognizing that you and you alone have given those beliefs all the meaning they have. There's no inherent truth or meaning behind any belief, no matter what our culture says about it. You are bigger than the culture that you live in. You are bigger than what your parents expect of you. You are bigger than what your significant other expects of you. You get to decide what everything means. And so that also means that, just because you don't have the job achievements that you've come to believe you would have if you were good enough, that doesn't make it true. You just have to go and examine where you came up with the idea that because you haven't achieved what you think you should have achieved, that means something is wrong with you. You learned that somewhere, you decided that somewhere, and you can go back and undecide it. That's an act of self-love, because when you are living in a state of feeling deficient because of something like that, it's with you 24/7. And when you get rid of it, it's gone 24/7, and your whole life is better. you can gauge pretty easily, I think, how many of these beliefs you have or how big the ones you have are by how happy you are. If you're miserable, it's because you have so many of these that there's constantly a belief being triggered by just being alive sometimes that's making you feel like shit about yourself. Examining your beliefs and changing your beliefs is the ultimate act of self-love and self-respect, and it's at the core of everything in the materialization realm, in the manifestation realm. If you want to go beyond manifesting a cup of coffee, or if you want to go beyond manifesting a sum of money or some specific thing, if you want to autopilot create all the time, sort of doing an overhaul of all your beliefs is going to be necessary. And to succeed in nearly any area, you're going to have to overhaul the beliefs in that area. That's been my experience. So I'm sure that there will continue to be debates about whether or not you need to love yourself in order to manifest a free cup of coffee, and of course you don't. But that's my take on the self-love thing. And I don't know why that phrase just bothers me. It just does. I don't know. I probably associate it with people that I don't want to be like. I don't know why. I like the hippies. It just feels weird to me to think about loving myself. I am planning to do some mirror work though, so we'll see. I'll report back on whether or not I can get used enough to that term to be able to say it with a straight face.